Well, it's going to get bigger and better under the circumstances, and only if you're using your smartphone better will help you survive better than your grandmother, or have you make you have more children.
Oh, I see.
Which may be true, but of course you need some way for this to translate.
Okay.
Then that gene needs to spread in the population, and it can only spread if having that particular type of thumb makes you survive or makes you reproduce more successfully than other people.
So an animal in the jungle that has good peripheral vision is less likely to be captured by its predator, and therefore, because of evolution, they'll get a better peripheral vision.
That's the essence of evolution, and to go on that example, in a city this may actually not always be the case, because a lot of birds, for example, die at the moment because they hit windows, glass windows, for which peripheral vision is not so important, but rather being able to focus straight ahead. And there are some birds which have very good peripheral vision, but very poor straight ahead vision, and those are the ones that are dying against glass windows. So you could even imagine that vision is something that would evolve differently in cities compared to jungles.
Now, the classic example of a species adapting to a changing environment is something I remember reading about back when I was in college. These moths back in England in the 19th century during the Industrial Revolution, as the pollution made the terrain more covered with soot or whatever, the moths became darker. Is that right? And then when England got over its pollution, those same moths evolved in the other direction to go white again?
Yeah, and that's a classic textbook case of rapid evolution, even though it's involved only a single gene. It was just a single factor on these moth chromosomes that made their wings turn dark, but that single gene spread throughout the species, across England, across mainland Europe, as pollution in the 19th century became prevalent. And indeed, as you say, in the 1950s, 1960s, these regulations for cleaner air were introduced and the pollution disappeared, and then the white moths had an advantage again, because the trees on which they rest became lighter colored again, and they were better camouflaged again on this lighter color, in the same way that the dark-winged ones were better camouflaged against the sooty trees during the height of the Industrial Revolution. All over the world, in cities and other human-altered environments, animals and plants are evolving all the time. They can evolve back and forth as conditions change, or can evolve in a different direction. It's also not true that evolution will necessarily always continue to work in the same direction. It works one generation at a time, so it can, if the conditions change, it can go into a different direction again. That's the nice thing about evolution. It's such a dynamic process.
That's kind of the breakthrough of your study, is that it's happening faster than we realize, and we can actually shape the direction that things are evolving if we do it thoughtfully.
Yeah, in theory, it's one of the things I say in my book, that we could change the way cities are planned. We could generate green spaces in the city in such a way that we can actually enhance this process of animals and plants adapting to cities.
Our guest right now on Travel with Rick Steves is Menno Schildhuisen. He's a professor of evolutionary biology at Leiden University in the Netherlands, and he's the author of Darwin Comes to Town, How the Urban Jungle Drives Evolution. It explores how humans are influencing the process of natural selection right now and around the world, with fascinating examples of how our fellow creatures are adapting. We have links to his works with this week's show at ricksteves.com/radio. Menno, in your book, you make it really clear that human beings are not just another species. We are the super species. It's like no other single species has ever been anywhere near so dominant.
Yeah, like you say, it's really, we tend to be very depressed about the impact that humans have on the Earth at the moment, but in a more objective way, it's also a very exciting time, because we're really living in a very historic moment of the history of life on Earth. It's never before has a single species been able to dominate the Earth's environment so drastically as we are.
Now, when I've flown across vast, spaces and looked down at the world from an airplane, the environmentalist in me kind of goes, well, thank goodness these urban landscapes are just a little rash breaking out in a few spots here and there. But in your book, you wrote that by 2030, 10% of the land mass will be urbanized, and much more will be affected by humans if you consider farmland and pasture. I mean, that's remarkable, isn't it, that such a substantial percent of the land on this planet will actually be covered in concrete or fenced by human beings?
Yeah. Cities are no longer just a small, marginal, biologically uninteresting part of the world. If ecosystems and biodiversity want to survive, they're going to have to live in cities because it's going to be a major natural habitat in its own right. I mean, we don't think of it as a natural habitat, but it is a place where humans concentrate food and all kinds of other resources, which could be an opportunity for many animals and plants to find a new niche in this new environment.
You talk about cities having their own climate and their own environment, these urban heat islands and so on. What are some of the things in a city that are causing this evolution?
Of course, not every species can live in cities, but the ones that do, they often find a lot of food. Humans bring in a lot of food and a lot of opportunity into their cities, and there are animals and plants that benefit from this, but they need to adapt because the conditions, it's really an extreme environment. The conditions in cities are very different from natural environments. Like you say, the urban heat island, the heat gets trapped in big cities. The concrete and the steel and the glass, they absorb solar radiation and then slowly radiate it out at night. So it can be more than 10 degrees centigrade hotter in the city center. And to adapt to those higher temperatures is one thing that you see happening in urban species.
There's a fun example in your book about mosquitoes. And if I'm a mosquito, and my grandma was living on bird blood, I find myself in London and it's warmer down in the underground in the metro, and I realize, it's just full of human beings walking banquets, if you like to suck on human blood. And an actual new species of mosquito would inhabit the London Underground.
Yeah, and that's exactly what's happened. The London Underground mosquito, Culex molestus, which has evolved not only in the London Underground, but in cellars and subway tubes and basements all over the world. And it has branched off, it has descended from, and probably quite recently in the last few hundred years, maybe a few thousand years, but at least during the time that people have been building these structures, it has descended from an ancestral species of mosquito that lived above ground and that was feeding on birds. And this underground mosquito that feeds on humans is very different, not only in the fact that it feeds on human blood, but also in the way it mates and the way its life cycle is constructed, as you say, underground in subways. It's warm the year round, there's food the year round, so that those underground mosquitoes have evolved into a separate species thanks to us.
What's another example of a creature that has adapted to a city?
Well, one of my favorite examples is, because it's one of the most striking ones, is the European blackbird. Which is not related to the American blackbird, it's actually closely related to the American robin. So the European blackbird was one of the first birds to colonize cities. Already very early in the 19th century, it started colonizing Rome and some cities in Germany, even though it was normally a very shy forest bird. It set up camp in the cities, and it has been doing that ever since. So now you find them in cities all over Europe and even in Asia and in islands on the Atlantic. And because they have started colonizing cities so early on, this is a process that's been going on for more than 200 years, they have evolved in all kinds of ways, probably in many different places of their chromosomes. There are differences now. For example, they have shorter beaks, probably because they feed on human food. They don't have to probe deep into the grass to get worms. They sing at a higher pitch because of the traffic noise that they have to rise above. And for the same reason, they sing very early in the morning, in the middle of the night, whereas a forest blackbird would never do that. They don't migrate anymore because there's food available the year round. They are less stressed, and all these differences are genetic. We have found genes that are responsible for all those differences.
This is Travel with Rick Steves. We're talking with Menno Skilthausen. His book is Darwin Comes to Town, How the Urban Jungle Drives Evolution. And Menno, when I was reading your book, you're a biologist. A biologist, you'd think, would not really like urban blight, but you wrote that what you enjoy about the urban situation is not the well-organized part, but the grimy, organic fabric of the city, revealed in forgotten corners where the threadbare carpet of culture gives way, the city's underbelly where the artificial and the natural meet and engage in ecological relations. What do you mean by ecological relations? It just sounds exciting.
Like I said, the city provides a lot of food and opportunities for wildlife, and at the same time that wildlife itself comes from all over the world. For example, when you're walking on the streets in a city, you might see some city pigeons, which are originally from southern Europe. You might see some grove snails, which are originally from Northern Europe. You might see species from Asia. You might see species from different parts of North America. These are all brought in by things like garden centers and the pet trade and simply accidentally introduced.
You even write how a fungus spreads to the bathrooms around the world by the toiletry kits of tourists.
Yeah, or Obasidium. Those are those orange moles that you can sometimes find in bathrooms. That's a single species that lives all over the world now.
Brought by travelers with their toiletry kits.
Yeah, people try to persuade me and other people to attach some sort of value to what's happening. And I just, to me, whether, it's an exotic species or a native species, to me doesn't really matter too much.
Right.
If it's doing its ecological job, then that's good enough for me.
And when you see a bird nest made out of cigarette butts or plastic strips, what do you think?
I think those are the successful birds. Those are the ones that have been able to adapt to local conditions where maybe there are no twigs available, but there are cigarette butts which actually have insecticide which help make their nests be much more healthy because it kills the mites and the fleas. Or a bird that has just chosen some plastic instead of twigs. To us it seems very sad and unnatural, but as long as those birds can raise their young in those artificial nests, to them it's fine, it's success.
So what is your summation here? You've gained an understanding of the power of evolution and the relentless adaptability of the living world. So what?
Well, I think it's very important for us to be aware of this because it is such a crucial natural process that we often think is something that's happening far away over long periods of time. We don't see evolution as something that you can observe in your backyard, but you can, and it goes fast and it happens everywhere and all the time. And we can actually, as non-biologists, even participate in studying this process. There are such wonderful citizen science projects nowadays where you can upload pictures and scientists can use those images to see how species are evolving in different cities all over the world. So that's really my vision for the future of having ordinary people who are doing citizen science simply because they enjoy it, really contributing to scientific research.
So are you saying that we could be considering that our urban spaces are also homes for animals and designing our future cities with that in mind? Is that actually something you could envision?
Yeah, there are different ways in which we could design our cities to help biodiversity and to help it evolve. For example, that's often in cities there's a tendency to create corridors between different parks, and this may be good for large animals, but for small animals actually it might be better to keep them isolated because we see that in cities there's a lot of sort of local adaptation going on, that the animals in parks are adapting to the local conditions of that specific park, and if you connect those parks, then you may lose that process of local adaptation. That's one of the advices I give.
This is Travel with Rick Steves. We've been talking with Menno Skilthausen. His book is Darwin Comes to Town, How the Urban Jungle Drives Evolution. Menno, when I think about how humankind intersects with nature and the animal kingdom and the plant kingdom, I'm thinking climate change, I'm thinking invasive species, I'm thinking new diseases borne by insects that are showing up where they're not supposed to show up. There's a lot of negative challenges that come with this super species on the planet. With your teaching, I suppose some people could say, well, you're not blowing any whistle that we have any responsibility on this planet. You're just saying, this is an exciting ride. Let's know where it's going and ride it smartly. How do you answer that?
Yeah, I am saying that, but at the same time, I'm not saying that all biodiversity can survive in cities and that everything can adapt. The examples I'm giving in my book are success stories of animals and plants that have been able to survive in cities. But in addition, of course, there are many species which simply go extinct because they cannot adapt. And for those species, we still need these pristine areas. So, for example, I'm also another sort of citizen science project that I'm doing is called Taxon Expeditions, and we take non-biologists into the jungle and discover new species with them. And those are species which you can only really find in those pristine forests and places where the human influence is minimal. And those species will not be able to survive in cities. So I think at the same time, we're still going to need a protected network of areas where the human influence is still very minimal.
Menno Skilthausen, author of Darwin Comes to Town, How the Urban Jungle Drives Evolution. thank you so much for your work and sharing it so eloquently in your book.
My pleasure, Rick. Thank you very much.
Travel with Rick Steves is produced by Tim Catton and Casmore Hall at Rick Steves Europe in Edmonds, Washington. Thanks to the Radio Foundation in New York and WABE Atlanta for studio support this week. Menno tells us what he notices around Amsterdam in a program extra to today's show. You can hear it from our website at ricksteves.com/radio.
Tune in to KTNA Saturdays at 11:30 for Adventures in Reading, a collaboration between KTNA and the Talkeetna Public Library. Each week, a new guest will help choose where the story takes us.
KTNA 88.9 FM.
The other thing young women know is if you're going to go out with a stranger, you meet them at a neutral place and you call at least one friend and say who you're going out with and where you're going. So I proceeded to call no one and give Mark my address. I thought, if this guy's a murderer, this could solve all my problems.
Join us for more stories told live. This week, 6 stories by women around the world. That's on the Moth Radio Hour from PRX.
You can hear Moth Radio Hour on KTNA Saturdays at 7 p.m.
This week, Says You takes a break from the present and breaks into the archives to share a classic episode, world-class wordplay with our original host, Richard Scher.
From Boston, Says You, a game of bluff and bluster, words and whimsy. Now, join our panelists and your host, Richard Scher.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome to the Regatta Bar in the Charles Hotel in the middle of Harvard Square for Says You, a simple game with words played by 2 teams, the first of which sits stereo right. Our chic and stylish rose between thorns, Francine Akbar. Our savvy traveler, our constant traveler, our fellow traveler, Tony Khan. And our man on the scene, our man about town, our man in our money, Mr. Barry Nolan. That was before I knew what he actually was going to wear to the taping today.
I was going to say, I'm dying to see that.
Yeah, captained over there by?
Rose Akbar, the lovely.
Rose Akbar will captain. To my left, team 2, our petite columnist and critic with the extra-large sense of the absurd, Carolyn Faye Fox. From CBS Boston, she's the queen of her medium, even though she's a bit irregular, Paula Lyons. And even though his brain is king-sized, it needs to be let out every now and then. Mr. Arnie Reisman. Captained over there by...
I'm having cups put on my cerebellum while we speak. I'll be captain now.
Arnie will captain. Our game is played in 5 rounds. Correct answers are worth 10 points, or whatever fraction thereof deemed appropriate. We always advise new listeners to grab a pen and paper. Let's begin with a round titled Instrumentality. Please describe the sound and appearance of the following musical instruments. Carolyn, the flugelhorn.
No, why do I get the flugelhorn?
Luck of the draw.
It looks like a big horn with a flugel on it.
It absolutely does, actually.
Yeah, it's got a flugel attachment.
It's kind of a miniature tuba.
It's got a big...
It's got a little, whatever you called it.
It sort of loops around. It's made of... It loops around, and it has sort of a flared
She's
bell
doing looping and flaring
opening,
motions with her hands.
And it sounds like...
Sounds more like a trumpet.
Yeah, you're right about that. It sounds more like another instrument. Anybody?
Like it's like a French horn, and a small tuba had an illegitimate child.
Right.
Yeah. Well, how many points do I give you for this?
Good question.
It's not really trumpet cornet like.
It's more bugle-like, actually. It's
So that's still a trumpet family, eh?
It is the trumpet.
I was trying to do.
Give them 8 points for that. It is basically a bugle with 3 valves, but a larger flared bell and mouthpiece. It gives it sort of a mellower sound than a bugle or a trumpet. And Chuck Mangione plays the flugelhorn quite often.
Does
he? Tony, a concertina.
Concertina is sort of the sound of a Castro convertible being run over by a very large trash compacting truck.
Yes, that's true.
It's a tiny little accordion.
That's exactly right.
Kind of like that. Or it sounds actually like what a cat would if it were conducting about 80 volts of house current.
10 points. 10 points for any cat joke I ever hear. There you go. You're exactly right. It's a small hexagonal accordion that has buttons on it instead of the keys. And
it was what my grandmother was always afraid my father would grow up to want to do for a living. And so he did worse. He became a writer.
Arnie, Glockenspiel.
Glockenspiel.
Glockenspiel. Yeah,
Glockenspiel. Little glockens. Then you got a big spiel.
And then a big spiel.
And it's like a sideways xylophone and ding, 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 ding. Percussion.
Yes, for those of you who don't have visual radio, it was pretty accurate there.
Right, it's meant to be carried in marching band.
Yeah. That's the
So you can hold it, right, as opposed to trying to walk with a marimba.
Yeah. Yes, walking with a marimba.
Yes.
10 points? Yeah, 10 points for that. It's usually seen in the marching band version, which has it's a bell-shaped lyre for a frame, really, and the 2 rows of the metal bars that are struck by the little hammers. And actually, the Glockenspiel is German for the playing of the bells. Francine, how about a balalaika? B-A-L-A-L-A-I-K-A.
Balalaika is a Russian stringed instrument.
It is, in fact.
Triangular in shape.
It is exactly.
A bit high and a little tinny.
A little, yeah, yes, it is high and a little tinny. As heard in
just about every drunken Russian song you can think of.
10 points, yes, very good.
Dr. Zhivago.
Dr. Zhivago, yes.
It's like a mandolin. Like a mandolin that wanted to grow up to be a ukulele.
Yes.
Yes, and went wrong somewhere along the line.
Another instrument my grandmother was afraid my father was going to grow up to want to play.
No, that was your great-grandmother.
Well, he kept his balalaika under the bed in the Avenue C apartment that they lived in. And one day when he was out, she found it and she crushed it. And it never sounded better than when she was crushing it.
Oh, my goodness. It is a Russian stringed instrument with a triangular body and 2 to 4 strings that are played with a pick. Can be as small as a mandolin or as big as a bass. I did not know that. Paula, what would a didgeridoo?
Oh, well, my goodness, it was just on television this morning. There was on CBS this morning. I'm so loyal to my own network. They were describing how you make it and how you play it. It is made from a very thin tree that has been hollowed out by termites. It is then cleaned and scraped and painted and sanded and what have you. And it makes the most unusual sound that is terrific in Australia. But it's like...
That's one of the best didgeridoos I've heard in a long time. Yes, very good.
I was hoping you would ask me what the bandoneon was.
What is it?
Spanish concertina.
No, the bandoneon is the instrument of tango. It's small. It is also like a concertina.
Well, that's next week. Next week's show.
Distinctive sound to tango.
The didgeridoo, and incidentally, I found out you can spell didgeridoo 17 different ways, and they're all acceptable. That's true. It's a long wooden drone trumpet of Australian Aborigines. It produces 2 low bass notes, but it's capable of tonal variations. And finally, Barry, a zither.
A zither is an instrument you sort of hold on a table or on your lap.
Yep, exactly.
And it has like buttons that you push that plays a chord, and you play it by strumming with your fingernails. And your elementary school teacher used to have you sing "Here She Comes Round the Mountain."
to it.
You know,
On a zither?
you know what?
Yes.
I'm going to
It
give
seems
10
very
points.
Elizabethan somehow, right? It's like the instrument for the white blues.
It's more
Yes.
guitar. It's more
You know?
guitar sounding.
Yeah, you know what I
Deep
think of?
waspy blues.
Anton Karas.
No, yeah, I always think of the Third Man
Anton
theme.
Karas.
Yeah, the Third Man theme from that movie. That's
right.
what it is. Yeah, it's actually a variety of stringed instruments. There's a number of different kinds of zithers that lie horizontally on a table. Your left hand frets the notes on its 5 strings, and your right hand plucks, and then there's 37 strings to the side, and it's just horrifying. And it was heard in the movie The Third Man, so that's where you would hear it. Very good. Let's go on to round 2, which is played with a little musical help from our friends Tom Eaton and Pick 3. It's the first of the Says You bluffing rounds. Arnie, each of you will receive a card defining a word. Only one will have the actual definition. The other 2 will get blank cards. Those poor souls will have a few seconds to make up a definition on the spot, good enough to fool Francine's team. 10 points up for grabs to Francine if she can sniff out the truth, or to you, Arnie, if she cannot. A few seconds musically enhanced to come up with a definition held aloft by the Swanson family. Eddie, Franny, and Mark. The word is deflection. D-E-F-L-U-X-I-O-N, deflection. Gentlemen?
Barry Nolan here from the Says You archives to remind you 10 years of Says You shows are now available to buy and own. They are spiffy, sassy, and digitally remastered, which just means we put our fingers all over them. To get your hands on past episodes from the archives, plus current shows on our podcast app, go to saisyou.net, where collectibles are so easy to get.
And Pick 3, Mr. Tom Eaton on guitar, Nate Leith on fiddle, Pat Conlon on mandolin, and Nick Alparo on the stand-up bass. Thank you, gentlemen. We've had a few moments with the word deflection. We will go first to a very expectant-looking Carolyn Faye Fox.
No, I'm not expectant.
Oh,
That's
okay.
how rumors start. Can I say? This is a very good word as the weather turns colder, because deflection not only refers to fluid matter running downstream, but to having a runny nose.
It is some sort of down-flowing
Runny nose.
runny nose. A runny nose. A deflection. You know, this is one of those gray areas.
Oh, go with the flow, Richard.
A runny nose. A deflection. Arnie?
Well, she's right on the fluid part. Actually, I can't believe you gave this word out since we just talked about my dog. But it's a chiropractic term. The act of pressing hard into the shoulder blades to release that cartilage and tension.
Release the cartilage, what, through your ears?
Through your ears. No, actually, introduce the cartilage and release the tension.
It is a chiropractic maneuver. Paula, deflection.
Well, you may think it's just a simple thing. Well, it kind of is. It's a complicated word for a simple thing. It just means the what happens when you hang flowers upside down to dry. All the moisture comes out. That is a process called deflection.
Hanging flowers upside down to dry.
Or dogs or noses.
Running.
Pressing on the shoulders or a runny nose.
Wow.
Francine,
Wow.
you're up against it.
I am, and I have occasionally got acid reflux
Mm-hmm.
disease. And I was looking for that idea in there.
You know, I seem to remember something from like 18th century science, and they are the evolution of the calculus that has something to do with fluxions. It's a very antiquated kind of term, fluxion.
What does that
And
lead you to believe?
So there's something having to do with fluids.
You going for that runny nose?
Well, I hate to. I wouldn't. You know, it's a tough thing to pick, but.
Just keep going.
Let's just roll with it, you know.
I'm throwing this whole show out. That's all there is to it.
Barry, do you wish
Fluid,
to,
something having to do with
To separate myself from this whole thing, I'm going to go with hanging flowers.
Hanging
You
flowers.
Okay.
Okay, well, I think...
Doesn't the X bother you, though, that, it's so old-fashioned to put, instead of CT, like nowadays, Florida's a CT. You'll edit this out, Richard, I'm sure. But an X in the middle of a word like that, to me, says, look back in time to some crazy idea of science. Look back to Newton. Look back to...
Well, they've had runny noses for a long time.
Yep, they have.
Of course, they have flowers.
I'm happy to stand aside and let you run with it.
Francine.
Okay, I'm going for the racing nose.
Carolyn,
Well,
they think it's a runny nose.
I guess I blew it.
That was the definition?
Defluction, or runny nose. Generally, any downflow of fluid matter.
Very good, Francine. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Well done. Well done. Let's go on to round 3. Listener Kevin C. McDonald of Madison, Wisconsin, hears us on WHHI-FM. His contribution to our day of music is titled Decomposed Composers. From the clues given, discern the name of the composer they suggest. For example, the opening, Only Fair, might be Debut C. Try this one, Carolyn.
Why not?
What composer is brought to mind by the clue Tavern Scuttlebutt?
Tavern Scuttlebutt. Bar Talk. Bella Bartok.
Bella Bartok is exactly right. Tavern Scuttlebutt is Bar Talk. Try this one, Tony. Jointly strategized.
Planned.
There you go.
Planned.
Planned.
What plan?
Jointly strategized.
Together.
Jointly.
Jointly. To plan.
Jointly. Together plan.
Ooh.
Collateral plan.
The other side, I believe, has it.
Together, union.
You pretty much have it, too. It's
Plan to plan.
Oh!
It's obviously...
That's right, rub it in.
Yeah.
Some kind of...
Seems to be some recognition on the other side. Any help over there? Boy,
I think we're stuck.
just stuck there. Go to the other side for Copeland is exactly right. Jointly strategized is co-planned. Copeland, Aaron Copeland. Very good.
Yes.
Co-planner.
Try this one, Arnie. Temporarily employ Jerry's ex.
Jerry, Jerry?
Yes. Temporarily employ Jerry's ex.
Jerry who?
Jerry
who?
I don't know.
Or Dean Martin.
Oh, Dean.
Yeah.
Borodine.
Borodine is exactly right.
Dean? Oh, you want a Dean, right?
Yes, I want a Dean.
No.
But to temporarily employ Jerry's ex is to borrow Dean. Borodine. Try this one, Francine. Endure those born in early August.
Those born in early August are Leos.
Bear Leos.
Bear Leos.
10 points. Bear Leos. If you endure those born in early
What a
August, you
team.
bear Leos. Bear Leos. Boy, you're going through this one pretty quickly. This is a tough one, but we'll try it anyway. Paula, loafer lover. Loafer lover.
Loafer?
L-O-A-F-E-R. Loafer lover. Schumann is exactly right. Very good. You guys are cruising through this. Ooh, the bell's ringing off the hook here. And finally, Barry, classifiers offspring.
Oh.
Ooh.
All right.
Classifiers
of offspring. Classifiers.
Well, if we're going with offspring,
botanist.
just a minute, go with
kids.
offspring. Son.
There you go.
Mendelssohn.
Mendelssohn.
Very good, Francine.
Very
Mendelssohn
good.
is exactly right. Gregor Mendel, the classifier, and his offspring son, Mendel's son. Very good, you guys. You just cruised through that category. So let's go on to round 4, which is Francine's chance to have a little fun at Webster's expense. One of you will correctly define the following word, 2 will bluff. 10 points, Arnie, if your team can find the rose among thorns. Take a few seconds to come up with a definition for the word Fulham. F-U-L-H-A-M. Fulham. Gentlemen?
Barry Nolan here from the Says You archives to remind you 10 years of Says You shows are now available to buy and own. Bundled by season for half price or purchase one episode at a time. They are spiffy, sassy, and digitally remastered, which just means we put our fingers all over them. To get your hands on past episodes from the archives, plus current shows on our podcast app, go to saisyou.net, where collectibles are so easy to get.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for giving us a little time with the word Fulham. We will go first to Tony Khan.
You're not going to believe this.
What else?
A Fulham is a way of posing a pig.
Whole ham, half ham.
Right. If you, and I happen to know this for a fact because I did spend one summer at the University of Nebraska and working in the library. When they pose pigs like Chester White hogs, they always pose them side view with their head in a trough. That seems to be the way to pose a pig. But if you want to get more information, yes. But apparently, if you want more information, like is it cute, or what does it really look like full on, you ask for a Fulham, which is a picture of the pig full on, affording frontal view.
Can you read that again?
A way to pose a pig to afford a frontal view.
Full frontal piggery.
And I think we'll just leave it at that.
Could someone make that up? Yes, I know you think I could.
Full frontal piggery. Yes, okay.
It's an off-Broadway show, actually.
With the exclamation mark,
Yes.
right?
Fulham!
Let's move on to Francine Akbar in the hope that we'll come up with something better.
Oh, okay. You know all those movies that have these heavy dramatic scenes that involve gambling, cards, Las Vegas, and I never understand the dramatic implications because I don't understand those games. And I always think I'm the only person who doesn't understand what's going on, but I'll bet I'm not. Often a key element in those movies, in those scenes, is the Fulham, which refers to loaded dice.
Loaded?
The game is crooked. I'm much more interested in the love story, but apparently the game is crooked.
So Fulham are illegal dice, or
in a manner of speaking.
Loaded dice.
Fulham?
Or is it the part of the plot that hinges on that?
No. It's
It
the
is,
dice.
okay.
It's the
Fulham,
dice.
Fulham is loaded
Fulham
dice.
is the actual dice on
Yes.
which the plot hangs.